Well, good morning. I'd like to welcome Adam Wilson from Wilpak Group as part of this Business Spotlight interview. Welcome, Adam.
Thank you, Phil. How are you?
I am going fantastically well, thank you.
That's great.
And so I guess if we just start out, please introduce what it is that your business actually does.
Okay, thanks, and thanks for the opportunity for the interview. It was a pleasant surprise. So, first off, thanks for that. So, Wilpak Group International, our purpose of our business is to improve world health. So, everything we do within our business is to improve world health, whether it's the material we make, whether it's the people we employ, and whether it's the customers that we work alongside. We are the leading thermal blanket pallet cover company, manufacturing company in Australia, and we've expanded to other parts of the world. Our products are designed to protect products that are affected by temperature risk points during transportation. So our Intel Cap product is a brand that we've built over 20 years.
Right.
We now have manufacturing in Australia, Singapore, and Manchester in the UK.
Oh, wow. Okay. So, I guess my background is actually from the food industry. So do you do a lot of stuff within the food industry as well?
Yeah, so we first began with our Intel Cap product. We developed a product was designed actually to protect cellophane. Can you believe it or not? For cellophane being exported to China, it was actually shrinking.
Okay.
So we were asked by a company to develop some type of thermal insulation, and we did that in 2003 or 2004 rather. And we thought this product works really well, so we headed towards the food industry with our products. Our food is a really interesting one because it's so broad. There's so many different temperatures with food. So our product was used on food. We do a fair bit with some of the dairy companies, but our main focus is pharmaceutical.
Right. Okay. And so when did you actually start the business? And then what sort of a geographic area? I think you've indicated that you've got broad manufacturing plants. So when did you start, and how far and wide do you go?
Yeah. Okay. So my background was with one of the largest packaging companies in the world, and they invented bubble wrap of all things. And in 2003, I got the bug to work for myself. In fact, I worked for a managing director who didn't see my growth within the company. And I thought, well, I'm working with a lot of distributors, so maybe I could do it by myself. So I went into business in general packaging in 2003. And it was with some partners in the business, and that kind of faded away pretty quickly. And we realised that you have to actually live on bread and water for the first few years, and a few of us couldn't do that because you think you're going to make $1 million when you first start. So we started in a little place in Tullamarine in Melbourne, just doing general packaging, and then we got into thermal packaging in around about 2004, and we really changed the business model and what we did. And our product was like talking to somebody about Google in 1980. It was something that was not very well known at all, and it took a long time to develop. And it was a real struggle for a lot of years. And there's a lot of times where there was only me left, and I thought, well, maybe I should go back and work for somebody else. And I don't know whether it was through ignorance or just pure perseverance that I kept going with it. And eventually we started to get traction in around 2007 with thermal blankets. And our first terrain to export was into India. And we went to India with Austrade with the support of your colleague who we were talking about before. And it was really interesting when we got to India to show them thermal blankets and how they could use thermal blankets over pallets of goods in place of refrigeration to save on fuel costs and things like that for things like food that you mentioned before. And I'll never forget that we got there with our distributor, and the distributor hadn't set up any calls. And we had to call on Austrade to set up the calls, and they set up a call with a company called Mother Dairy. And we went to Mother Dairy, and I sat down and said, "Can you explain to me what you do, how you transport and stuff?" And he explained what they did with milk and so forth. And I said, "Okay, well," and I looked at my distributor and said, "This is how you sell our product," me being the expert. And I said, "So with our product, you know how you deliver your milk on pallets?" And he looked at me blankly and he said, "What's a pallet?" And I thought, okay, he doesn't know what a pallet is. I don't know where to go to from here. I said, "Well, you know, when you load a truck with the forklift," and he said, "What's a forklift?" And I thought, I'm too early to market and they don't really understand. And I said, "Well, how do you load your truck?" And he said, "Well, I push this button here and then every person walks out of that factory with a box and they load the truck." So there's no pallet or anything of how they did that. So our foray into India stopped pretty quickly. And then it wasn't until 2014 that we started exporting again. We got into the pharmaceutical space, as I mentioned, and we have a world-leading thermal blanket based on the technology that we have,
Right.
that is not available overseas. Now, being in Melbourne, Australia, we're the furthest point away from our target market, but it took us time to build up to that as well. So we're now in over 30 locations globally and expanding. And we've just expanded our manufacturing to Manchester in the United Kingdom, and we're also looking to other parts of Europe, probably by the end of this year, and the US next year.
Well, congratulations and well done.
Thank you. Thank you.
And so I'd just like to explore the, you mentioned a little bit before about, you know, you had some doubts as to whether to keep going, and you mentioned the word perseverance. Tell us about that, Adam. Is what do you think the driver was? What were the challenges that you actually had to overcome in those early days?
It's a really interesting question. So obviously, the big one is the cash flow. You don't. It's like driving a Ferrari and looking at a petrol station and thinking, "Have I got enough petrol to get there or not? Do I get out and push?" You've got no one else to help you push because they need to be paid as well. And the alternatives are you go work for somebody else. And a lot of times it can be quite hard to go to work for somebody else because employment can be hard because you look at business differently when you're working for yourself versus going to work for somebody else, and that can represent its own challenges, particularly from within, because you feel that you can do a better job, but you're actually it's somebody else's dream and they want to run it their way. So a lot of it is I suppose you could call it a little bit of ego that pushes you through as well. But also you've got to realise at some stage, okay, if this is not working, what can I do that does work? And what parts are working? Because, you know, I've never seen a business that 100% doesn't work. There's always some part of it that works. So grab hold of that pit that does work and understand why does that work and where does it fit and how can I grow that and not worry about the other. We always hear in business about the 80-20 rule. And the 80-20 rule is so well put in so many different facets of the business. And most times, 80% of your headaches come from 20% of your customers.
Old 80-20 rule.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. So just look at where the 80% of the opportunities come from 20% of your customers as well. So one of the sayings that we live in and die by within our business is we can be anything we want. We just can't be everything.
And I think that, you know, that's a problem that a lot of businesses have, you know, and if you look at some of the stories of the big corporates that try to be all things and everything, and then, you know, somewhere down the track have actually gone back to what their basic core business has been because they realise that they can't do everything.
No, exactly right. And there's a famous book called Principles by Ray Dalio, which is something that it's one of the best books I've ever read and listened to. And that's the big thing in that was you can be anything you like, but you just can't be everything. So choose what you're actually really good at. So in our case, we knew that we had a world-class product and we were ahead of market, which represented its own challenges. But you have to believe. And I believed in our business. I believed in our people. I believed in the product. And I just knew it required the effort and the work to do it. It wasn't going to be easy. There's no magic formula except belief. And you have to keep persevering and sacrificing.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And I think that, you know, that's one of the key things, that when you do go into business, unless you've got that belief, unless you've got that perseverance, the persistence, then you will always struggle. So well done for sticking with it, Adam.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you.
And you know, when you think back now and you reflect and look on those past years to where you are now, what are the key things that actually stand out for you?
Of where I was and where I am?
Yes.
Gee, you learn so much. You learn so much about yourself. You learn so much about people.
Yep. And what were the key things that you learned about yourself?
Well, I come from a sporting background, so I always knew that you had to have perseverance, and you're always going to be filled with a lot of self-doubt. But if you believe in something, you just got to keep persisting with it and keep working at it. It's no different than, you know, going to football training. You look at some of the greatest athletes of all time. Rarely were the most talented ones, but they were the hardest workers, and they worked on the things that they were really, really good at. You know, if you think of Michael Jordan, he was fantastic as an offensive player, and then became the best defensive player, and then become probably the greatest player of all time. And then there's footballers that do the same thing as well, where they just consistently work on the same things over and over and over again. And you know, the difference in sports and the difference in businesses, they're not too dissimilar. And that's one thing I really learned, that, you know, if you stick to the basics and keep to the basics and do really well at the basics, it will turn and it will work out for you. Being an entrepreneur, it's really, really difficult because you've got to remain focused. And you know, that'd be the one key thing that I sort of mentioned straight up, is that you've got to remain focused, because if your focus changes, you can get disturbed a lot and get into different things as well. So if you can focus on something, that's what you've got to do, even when it's boring.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, it's one of the things that when I'm working with my clients, that, you know, what we try and do is stay focused on them, you know, them putting the right attention, energy, and that focus on doing what I call the right things in business. Yeah, that becomes so important. And it's spotting the distractions. It's
all the time.
The distractions, those bright, shiny objects that can tend to get in the way. Yeah. And, you know, are big contributors to, you know, losing the focus that you really need to be having. So totally. Yeah, totally. Well done. Within the businesses that I've had, the amount of time that I've lost the focus, and it's cost me a lot of money, but it's also cost me a lot of time as well. Yes. Where I thought I could be everything, but it's just impossible. So remain focused on what you're really good at. Yeah. Okay. So what's been some of the biggest issues that you've had to overcome, you know, and let's say probably more so in the recent years? Okay, good question. So in the most recent years with our products, just to go back a bit, in 2014, we were, I suppose our product really started to gain traction globally, was because the TGA and the FDA and the regulatory bodies globally for pharmaceuticals changed the regulations of how they actually transport their goods. So where things are written on even a packet of Band-Aids that it says store at 30 degrees, they had to show cause of how they were keeping the product at 30 degrees. And some of the alternative products can be in the thousands of dollars, yet thermal blankets are in the low hundreds of dollars.
So therefore, they're actually much more cost effective to do that. And they had to report to the TGA how they were actually shipping. So the thermal blanket market really started to take off. Now, one of our greatest challenges is we were first to market. Now, being first to market is always a challenge because you're actually trying to educate people who don't have the same passion and same foresight as yourself. They only know the now, and this is what they do. And if it's not broken, don't fix it. So when the TGA started to come in and the FDA started to come in with changing the GDP regulations of how they actually transport pharmaceutical goods, there was a tremendous growth within the industry. Now, our biggest challenge is we're in Melbourne, Australia. The biggest market for our products is in Europe and the UK, in the US. So we couldn't be more further away from what we were trying to do. So to grow a business and compete with companies that are $1 billion companies, and we're a little small company in Australia, was really a challenge. So not only were we a very small company, we had cash flow issues as well. But also, how do we expand into markets that we're not even in yet? So then it becomes, well, do you take the leap of faith and go overseas and try and do that and expand the business? Or do you sit back in Australia and have a nice business? Now, I'm a competitive beast, so therefore I like to have business as big as I possibly can. We were very fortunate with some of the companies that we already do business with. We do business with companies like Pfizer and DHL and GlaxoSmithKline and Merck Sharp and Dohme, and these are global top 5 pharmaceutical companies globally. And it came to a head in around about 2018 where these companies said, well, look, we really have to consolidate our suppliers. And whilst your product is very good and it does everything we want to do, our retention rate in our business is in the high 90s, 90%. So we rarely lose customers once we get them. But the challenge was these companies were saying, we'd love to use your product, but we can't buy it in Europe. If we can't buy it in Europe, we can't buy it anywhere. So we had to expand into Europe pretty quickly to gather that market. And then COVID hit. So as we just started in 2020, I was in London in January 2020, and we'd set up a distributor there and starting to get some traction. I'd started talking with some contract manufacturers and things were looking really, really good. And obviously I came home in January and never went back for 2 years. So that was a real challenge, but pressure creates diamonds. And it was probably one of the best things that happened for our business because it really made us sit back and analyse what we were really good at. And why do we do our products? And why do we have the materials we do? So when we were ready to go in 2022, April 2022, we knew everything about our business. We had continued our discussions with our partners overseas, and we developed a relationship. We kept supplying our customers through Asia because we already had manufacturing in Asia. So that kept our foothold. So once April 2022 hit, it was March 2022, I was on a plane to the UK and went there to some trade shows, continued our relationship with our potential contract manufacturers and suppliers. And here we are today. So I just got back a couple of weeks ago from Europe, and now we've got full manufacturing of all of our product range in Manchester, and we're supplying companies in France and Belgium. With an outlook into Amsterdam and other countries as well. By the end of the year, we've decided to work with agents and distributors, but more so with agents to have people's feet on the ground and so forth as well.
Yeah, fantastic. And so you mentioned this thermal blanket. Is it reusable, Adam?
Totally. Yes. So one of the areas that we looked at was the environmental impact of our product, and obviously there's different plastics that can be recycled and some that can't. So we go back to a purpose in our business, and our purpose of our business is to improve world health. So therefore, we could have got a cheaper product that doesn't work as well, and really flooded the market. However, we knew that the product wouldn't really work and it wouldn't improve world health, because at the end of the day, the products that we're protecting could be the difference between somebody being in a hospital bed and somebody not. So the materials we chose were very specific. So our metallized polyester has a UV stabilizer in it, for instance, that is an inert product. So, in 1,000 years' time, it will keep reflecting the radiant heat that it needs to. The air cylinder that we chose is a military grade air cylinder, so it can be used in aircraft, and the air doesn't fall out of the bubble at any stage, whether it's under pressure or not. So therefore, our product can be used over and over again. So our sustainability message is more about reusability versus recyclability.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Fantastic. If you were to think about starting the business again, Adam, what would you do differently this time?
Not a thing. Nothing. You've got to learn the mistakes. You've got to fail. You've got to, there's lots of times where you sit back and say, gee, I wish I wouldn't have done that. But if I hadn't have done that, I wouldn't be where I am. I've had many failures within the business, or many, and I've made so many mistakes. I really have. And every single one of them, I look back now and think that was the cheapest lesson I ever got. Because had I kept going along the roads that I was going and it wasn't failing, I would have developed something into something that was quite big. And then it would have fallen over. It would have been a hell of a lot worse.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't change a thing. Nothing.
Fantastic. And look, I think that's really important lessons, is that you have to be prepared and accept that you will have some failures.
Yeah, and people are going to doubt you.
And you've got to find out what works, what doesn't work, so that you can move forward. So, that's very bold and very wise. So, just in finishing up then, Adam, is what other words of wisdom would you give somebody that was considering going into business?
Look at your support network. Whether that's your family, your wife, your children, your extended family, your friends. Surround yourself with people that believe, because there's going to be a lot of times where you don't believe, and there's many times people will tell you that they don't believe. And sometimes you've got to separate the people that want you to fail, because there are people within your network that do want you to fail for their own reasons of not being able to do it themselves. But there's also there's the sympathy side too, where people, they don't want you to fail, but they don't want you to keep getting hurt as well. So it does, most times it comes from a good place. So that would be one thing. Be prepared that it's not going to be easy. There is no magic formula. There is no magic book. There is no magic spell website. It's just damn hard work the whole time. And one of my many mentors' one of my favorite sayings is, do first things first and second things never.
Wonderful advice.
Thanks.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Adam. And if anybody is watching this and has a need for any thermal blankets or other temperature control type of units for transportation, please reach out to Adam at Wilpak Groups. Thank you so much for your time today, Adam.
Thank you, Phil, and I hope you have a great day.